Out I'd been written out of my own family 5 minutes before the champagne was poured. I wasn't snooping. I wasn't eavesdropping. I was standing exactly where I was told to stand, holding a coat I didn't recognize, in a house I helped pay for, listening to my mother introduce my younger sister as the future of our family business. Before I tell you how that sentence ended my old life and started a new one, let me ask you something. If you've ever been sidelined by the very people who raised you, if you've ever been treated like background noise in a room you helped build, tap like, leave a comment, or subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. This story doesn't get kinder from here, but it does get honest. My name is Claire Whitman. I was 31 years old that winter, and until that night, I believed silence was a form of loyalty. The house was my parents' place in Greenwich, Connecticut. A white colonial with black shutters, 6 bedrooms, and a driveway long enough to make guests feel small before they rang the bell. My father, Richard Whitman, liked it that way. He built his first logistics company out of a rented office in Newark and spent the rest of his life proving he belonged in rooms that didn't want him. Control was his love language. The occasion was my mother's 60th birthday. Margaret Whitman insisted it wasn't a party, just family and a few close friends. In Whitman terms, that meant a caterer flown in from Manhattan, a string quartet in the living room, and a guest list that included 2 local judges and the CEO of a bank that had denied my father a loan 20 years earlier. I arrived alone, not because I didn't have someone, but because my mother had said, very carefully, "Let's keep it simple tonight, Claire. This is about family." Family. I had learned that word was elastic. I hung my coat on the rack and scanned the room. My sister, Emily Whitman, 27, stood near the fireplace in a red dress that still had the tag crease pressed out. She was laughing too loudly at something my uncle said, her hand resting possessively on his arm. She looked relaxed, owned. I recognized the look because I used to wear it. Emily saw me and smiled, the way you smile at someone you assume will always understand. She didn't wave. She didn't cross the room. She turned back to her conversation. I poured myself a drink and listened. People asked me what I was doing now. I gave them the short version. Venture capital, advisory boards, a foundation I'd set up for women-owned startups in the Midwest. They nodded politely, already looking past me for someone louder. My father clinked his glass. The room settled. He talked about my mother, about resilience, about legacy. Then he said the word that made my stomach go cold. Succession. He gestured toward Emily. I'm proud to announce that Emily will be stepping into an expanded role at Whitman Freight Solutions, he said. Effective immediately. She'll be overseeing operations and preparing to take on executive leadership next year. Applause filled the room. I felt my face stay perfectly still. That was something I'd learned early. You don't flinch when people decide things for you. I waited. For my name. For a glance. For anything that acknowledged the fact that I had spent 4 years as a managing partner at a New York venture firm that had doubled its portfolio under my watch. That I had helped my father renegotiate debt during the last recession. That I had introduced him to 2 of the close friends, now clapping politely. Nothing came. My mother squeezed Emily's hand. My father kept talking. This business needs fresh energy, he said. New ideas. And Emily has the instinct for it. Instinct. Not experience, not results. I felt something shift. Not anger, recognition. Emily's eyes flicked toward me then, just for a second. There was a question in them. Not, are you okay? But, you're okay with this, right? I took a sip of my drink. I nodded once. Later, as people moved toward the dining room, my mother cornered me near the hallway. You're being very quiet, Margaret said, her voice light. I hope you're not taking this personally. I looked at her, at the pearls I'd bought her 5 years ago, at the faint line between her brows that appeared whenever she was about to reframe reality. Why would I said. She smiled, relieved. You've always been so independent. Emily needs this. She needs direction. I thought of the nights I'd stayed up rewriting my father's pitch decks, the calls I'd taken from his CFO while I was boarding flights, the checks I'd quietly arranged when cash flow dipped and pride got in the way. Direction. Dinner was served. I was seated at the far end of the table, next to a woman who asked me if I planned to have children before it was too late. Emily sat beside my father, already answering questions about routes and margins, like she'd been doing it for years. Halfway through the main course, my uncle raised a toast. "To family," he said, "and to the future owners of Whitman Freight." Owners. The word landed harder this time. I looked at my plate, at the reflection of the chandelier in my wine glass. I felt the old reflex rise up, the one that said, "Don't disrupt, don't embarrass, don't make this harder." Then I felt something else underneath it. Colder, clearer. If this was the future, it had been decided without me. After dessert, as coats were fetched and cars called, my father pulled me aside. "You understand," Richard said, not a question. "This isn't about affection. It's about fit." I met his eyes. "Do I?" He hesitated. "Just long enough. You've always had one foot out the door," he said. "Emily is here." I nodded again. That same small nod. That night, driving back to my apartment in Manhattan, I replayed every moment, not with bitterness, with inventory, dates, words, omissions. By the time I crossed the bridge, I knew one thing for certain. I hadn't been overlooked. I had been excluded. And if they thought that was the end of it, they had mistaken my silence for surrender. It wasn't. I didn't confront anyone the next morning. That surprised even me. Instead, I woke up at 5:12 a.m. in my apartment on West End Avenue, made coffee I barely tasted, and opened my laptop like it was any other Tuesday. The city outside my window was still half asleep. I like New York best at that hour. Fewer witnesses, fewer opinions. I replayed my father's words again. One foot out the door. It wasn't wrong. It was just incomplete. By 7, I was on a call with Daniel Moore, my legal counsel. Daniel wasn't flashy. Mid-40s, former corporate litigator turned quiet assassin for people who needed things handled without noise. He had helped me structure my foundation, unwind 2 bad investments, and once saved a client from a very public implosion without a single headline. He answered on the second ring. "You sound awake," he said. "I need clarity," I replied. "Not reassurance." There was a pause. He knew that tone. "Talk to me," Daniel said. I told him everything. The dinner, the announcement, the word succession, the way my name had never been spoken. I kept my voice level. I didn't editorialize. Daniel listened without interrupting, the way professionals do when they're deciding where the real leverage is. When I finished, he asked one question. "Do you have a copy of the will?" I stared at the screen. "No," I said. "I was told it hadn't been updated." Daniel exhaled slowly. "When were you told that?" 2 years ago. By my mother." Another pause. "Claire," he said carefully, "people don't announce succession without paperwork." I felt something tighten in my chest. Not panic, just confirmation. "Find out," I said. "I'll need authorization." "You'll have it," I replied, "if it exists." By 9, I was dressed and heading downtown. I had a standing advisory session with a fintech startup in Soho, a company I'd helped shepherd through a brutal seed round the year before. Their CEO, Marcus Reed, was 34, brilliant, and allergic to corporate theater. I liked him because he listened. We sat across from each other in a glass-walled conference room, while his team projected churn metrics onto the screen. "You're distracted," Marcus said, not unkindly. "I'm recalibrating," I answered. He nodded. "That usually means someone underestimated you." I didn't smile. "What makes you say that?" "You ask fewer questions when you already know the answer." The meeting ended early. As I stood to leave, Marcus added, "For what it's worth, if you ever wanted a more permanent seat somewhere, I know people who'd move mountains." By lunchtime, my phone buzzed. "Emily." I let it ring once. Twice. Then I answered. "Hey," she said brightly. Too brightly. "I was just thinking about you." I closed my eyes briefly. "Were you?" I said. She laughed. "Don't be like that. Last night was a lot." "For you?" I asked. "For everyone," she corrected. "Dad's under pressure. You know how he gets." I pictured my sister at the head of the table, accepting congratulations she hadn't earned yet. "What do you want, Emily?" There it was. The pause, this time, was hers. "I was hoping you could help me," she said. "With the transition. You've done this kind of thing before." I leaned against the kitchen counter. "You want my advice?" I said. on a role I wasn't considered for. "It's not like that," she said quickly. "You're different. You have your own world." There it was again. 1 foot out the door. "I do," I said, "and I intend to keep it that way." Her voice cooled. "You don't have to punish me for Dad's decisions." "I'm not punishing anyone," I replied. "I'm observing." "Claire, I have a meeting," I cut in. "Good luck." I ended the call before she could say anything else. That afternoon, Daniel called back. "There is a will," he said. I sat down. "And?" "It was revised 18 months ago," he continued. "Your mother is executor. Your father signed. So did 2 witnesses." I waited. Daniel had learned not to rush me. "You are mentioned," he said, "but not as a beneficiary of the business." I closed my eyes. Just for a second. "What am I?" I asked. "A contingency," Daniel replied. "You inherit a trust. Liquid assets. No voting rights. No operational control. And Emily, she inherits controlling interest in Whitman Freight Solutions." There it was. Clean. Surgical. "Is it legal?" I asked. "Yes," Daniel said. "Is it ethical? That depends on who you ask." I thought of my father's hand on Emily's shoulder, of my mother's smile, of the years I'd been the quiet problem solver. "When does it take effect?" I asked. "Upon death," Daniel said, "unless amended." I stood up and walked to the window. The city moved below me, indifferent. "What else?" I said. Daniel hesitated. "There's a clause." "Of course there is. If you contest the will," he said, "your trust is voided." I laughed once, sharp, unamused. "So silence is incentivized." Precisely. After the call, I didn't cry. I didn't throw anything. I didn't call a friend. I opened a spreadsheet. By evening, I had mapped out every intersection between my work and my family's business. Introductions I'd made, capital I'd arranged, vendors who answered my calls faster than my father's. I hadn't realized how embedded I was until I saw it laid out in cells and columns. At 8, my mother texted. "You seemed distant today. Are you all right?" I typed back, "Just busy." She responded with a heart emoji. I didn't reply. Later that night, I pulled an old box from my closet. Inside were contracts, handwritten notes, and a thin leather folder labeled Whitman Freight, 2016. I flipped it open. The first page was an email chain. My father, a bank, a loan he'd been denied. Then my response. A quiet introduction, a meeting arranged, terms revised. At the bottom, his reply. "Thank you, Claire. I don't know what I'd do without you." I closed the folder. By midnight, I understood the shape of what had been done to me. It wasn't a single betrayal. It was a pattern. Years of subtle redirection, of positioning me as support rather than successor, of rewarding compliance with proximity instead of power. They hadn't pushed me out. They had counted on me stepping back. I lay awake in the dark, listening to the city hum, and made a decision I didn't announce to anyone. If they wanted me out of the room, I would leave. But I would take the doors with me. And the first person who would feel that absence wouldn't be my father. It would be Emily, because she had just asked for my help. And I had every intention of giving it. Emily started calling me every day after that. Not long conversations. Short, transactional ones. Questions dressed up as confidence. She asked about vendors, about contracts, about which freight software actually worked and which ones were just expensive demos. She asked how to handle a warehouse manager in New Jersey who kept missing deadlines. She asked what my father meant when he said, "Handle it the way Claire would." I answered calmly. "Precisely." I gave her exactly what she asked for. I didn't warn her. I didn't correct her tone. I didn't remind her that none of this was supposed to be my responsibility anymore. I just watched. On Thursday, she called while I was walking into a midtown hotel for a closed-door panel with 3 institutional investors. I stopped in the lobby and took the call. "Claire," Emily said, already talking fast. "Quick question. Do you remember the carrier contract with Blackline Logistics?" "Yes," I said. "Why?" "They're pushing back on rates," she said. "Dad says you handled that last time." "I did," I replied. "So what did you do?" I smiled faintly. I walked away. There was silence on the line. "You walked away?" she repeated. "They needed us more than we needed them," I said. 2 weeks later, they came back with better terms. "That's risky," Emily said. "So is pretending leverage exists when it doesn't?" I replied. Do you want advice or reassurance? Another pause. Then, advice. Then don't blink first, I said. And don't negotiate from fear. She thanked me and hung up. Inside the elevator, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. I looked composed, neutral, almost bored. That was new. By Friday afternoon, Daniel Moore sent me an email with the subject line, Additional Documents. Attached were 3 PDFs. The first was the full text of my parents' revised will. I skimmed it once, then again more slowly. The language was airtight, painfully so. My exclusion wasn't emotional, it was procedural. The second document was a shareholder agreement for Whitman Freight Solutions. Emily's name appeared repeatedly. Mine did not. The third document made me stop. It was a side letter, signed by my father, Richard Whitman, and the company's primary lender, dated 6 months ago. I read it twice. Then I called Daniel. Did you see this? I asked. Yes, he said. I was hoping you would. This guarantees the loan, I said, personally. Yes. Using what collateral? Daniel didn't answer immediately. Daniel. The family trust, he said. Your mother's trust. The one you're a named beneficiary of. I closed my eyes. So if the company defaults, you lose your trust, Daniel finished. Even though you have no control over the business, they hadn't just excluded me. They had positioned me as a safety net. That's not disclosed anywhere else, I said. No, Daniel replied. It's legal, barely, but it's quiet. I felt the familiar urge to confront, to demand explanations, to force a reckoning. I let it pass. Do nothing, I said. For now. Daniel hesitated. Claire, I said, for now. I almost declined. Instead, I said yes. Sunday came gray and cold. We met at a restaurant she liked on the Upper East Side. White tablecloths, predictable menu. A place where difficult conversations were diluted by polite service. She ordered before I arrived. You look tired, Margaret said, reaching for my hand. I'm busy, I replied, withdrawing it gently. She frowned, just slightly. Your father says Emily's overwhelmed. I took a sip of water. That's not surprising. She wasn't expecting things to move so fast, my mother said. Neither was I replied. Margaret smiled thinly. You always land on your feet. There it was. The compliment that doubled as dismissal. Do I asked. She tilted her head. You've never needed us the way Emily does. I looked at her then. Really looked. At the woman who had taught me how to balance a checkbook at 10 and how to apologize without admitting fault at 12. You needed me, I said quietly, just not publicly. Her eyes flickered. That's not fair, she said. No, I agreed. It's accurate. She reached for her napkin, folded it, unfolded it. Your father worries about you, she said. He thinks you're pulling away. I am, I replied. Why? Because you already let go, I thought. Instead, I said, because I was never invited to stay. We ate the rest of the meal in near silence. That night, Emily called again. This time, her voice wasn't confident. With what? The numbers, she said. Cash flow isn't matching projections. Dad says it's temporary, but he doesn't like to admit when he's late to the truth, I finished. She swallowed. I could hear it. What should I do? I leaned back on my couch and stared at the ceiling. What do the covenants say? I asked. I'm not sure, she admitted. That's a problem, I said. Can you look? She asked. Just to make sure. I paused. Just long enough for her to feel it. Send me the documents, I said. I'll review them. She exhaled audibly. Thank you. I knew I could count on you. After we hung up, I didn't open the documents right away. I opened a different folder instead. One labeled Personal. Inside was a list I'd started years ago. Contacts. Favors owed. People who answered when I called because I never wasted their time. I added a name. Ethan Brooks, Senior Credit Officer. The same bank that financed Whitman Freight. Then I closed my laptop. By Monday morning, I had everything I needed to know. The company wasn't just tight, it was exposed. And Emily, for all her confidence, had just stepped into a role where one wrong move wouldn't embarrass her. It would erase me. We should talk. Tomorrow. I stared at the message. For the first time since the dinner, I smiled, because tomorrow I wouldn't be listening. I would be deciding who else was. My father chose the venue. That alone told me how the conversation would go. He asked me to meet him at the old Whitman Freight headquarters in Newark, the original building with peeling paint and a parking lot that still smelled faintly of diesel and burnt coffee. He liked that place because it reminded people where he came from. He liked to control the emotional temperature of a room before anyone spoke. I arrived 10 minutes early, not to be polite, to observe. The lobby hadn't changed in years. Same scuffed tile, same faded company timeline on the wall that conveniently stopped before I'd ever been involved. The receptionist, a woman named Carol who'd known me since my 20s, looked up and smiled. "Good to see you, Claire," she said warmly. "Your dad's in the conference room." Not our conference room. His. Richard Whitman stood when I walked in. He didn't hug me. He gestured to a chair across from him. A legal pad sat neatly in front of him, pen aligned, control rehearsed. "You look well," he said. "So do you," I replied, sitting. He didn't waste time. He never did when he thought he had leverage. "Emily's struggling," he said. I waited. "She's capable," he continued, "but she's green. This is a complex operation." Still waiting. "I need you to help her," he said finally, quietly. There it was, the unspoken rule dressed up as a request. "Help how?" I asked. He leaned back. "You know how. Advise. Smooth things over. Use your contacts if you have to." And in return, I said, "What changes?" He frowned. "This isn't a negotiation." I met his eyes. "Everything is." His jaw tightened. "A small thing. Most people missed it. I never did." "Your sister is under a lot of pressure," he said. "This isn't about you." "It never is," I replied. He waved a hand dismissively. "You chose a different path. I was redirected," I said calmly. Repeatedly. Silence stretched between us. The hum of the old HVAC filled the space. "You're being dramatic," he said. "No," I replied. "I'm being precise." He looked at me then. Really looked, as if recalculating. "You've always been independent," he said. "That's a strength. But family businesses require loyalty." I smiled faintly. "So does fairness." He leaned forward. "What do you want, Claire?" The question sounded generous. It wasn't. "I want transparency," I said. "I want to know why my trust is collateral for loans I didn't approve." His eyes flicked down for half a second. "Got you. That's not your concern," he said quickly. "It is if I lose it," I replied. He straightened. "You're protected by silence," I said. His voice hardened. "You're reading too much into things." "I've read everything," I said, "including the side letter from 6 months ago." The color drained from his face slowly. He hadn't expected that. "That was a formality," he said. "A backstop. For a company I don't control," I replied. "Run by a sister who doesn't understand the covenants." He stood abruptly. "Watch your tone." I stayed seated. "Watch your structure," I said. "Because if the bank tightens terms, the first thing they'll look at is the guarantor." "You wouldn't let that happen," he said. It wasn't a question. It was an assumption. I stood then, not in anger. In conclusion, "I'm already letting it happen," I said. "By stepping back." He stared at me. "You're threatening your own family." "No," I replied. "I'm declining to be the shield." He opened his mouth to respond. I didn't wait. "I won't undermine Emily," I said. "And I won't rescue her from decisions she doesn't understand. If she wants my help, she can ask for it publicly. If you want my loyalty, you can earn it." I walked out before he could answer. Emily called me that night. Her voice was brittle. "Dad says you're refusing to support me," she said. "I'm refusing to lie," I replied. "That's not fair," she snapped. "You know how much this means to him." "And you," I added. She exhaled sharply. "You're punishing me for something I didn't do." "I'm letting you experience the role you accepted," I said. "You sound cold," she said. "I'm calm," I replied. "There's a difference." She went quiet. "Claire," she said finally, softer now. "I need you." I closed my eyes. "Then you need to listen," I said. "You are exposed. The loan terms are tighter than you realize. If cash flow dips again, the bank won't call Dad. They'll call the guarantor." She swallowed. "Mom." "Yes," I said. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Why didn't they tell me?" "Because they assumed I'd fix it," I replied. A beat. "What do I do?" she asked. For now, I said. Nothing. What? Nothing publicly, I clarified. You gather information. You stop making promises. You slow everything down. And you? She asked. I prepare, I said. For what? I looked at the city lights outside my window. For the moment when they realize silence isn't loyalty, I said. It's leverage. After the call, I opened my laptop and drafted an email to Ethan Brooks. Short, polite, curious. Subject: quick question on exposure. I didn't accuse. I didn't demand. I asked. By midnight, he replied. Claire, good to hear from you. Let's talk tomorrow. There are developments you should be aware of. I leaned back in my chair and let the quiet settle. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was positioning. And somewhere between my father's certainty and my sister's panic, the balance was already shifting. They just didn't feel it yet, but they would. The bank didn't call my father first. That was the first crack. Ethan Brooks called me at 8:07 a.m. on Tuesday. Exactly the way men like him do when they want to sound casual about something that isn't. Claire, he said, warm but careful. Do you have 20 minutes? I do now, I replied. We met at a cafe near Bryant Park. Neutral territory, glass walls, no room for raised voices or theatrics. Ethan arrived on time, dark suit, conservative tie. A man who liked to look reasonable, even when delivering bad news. He didn't order coffee. That usually means trouble, I said. He smiled faintly. You always were observant. We didn't waste time. Whitman Freight Solutions is in technical breach, he said. I nodded once. I had expected that. Nothing dramatic yet, he added quickly. But the margin for error is gone. One missed covenant, one delayed receivable, and the bank has the right to restructure. And call the guarantor, I said. Yes, Ethan replied. Your mother's trust. I folded my hands on the table. Why am I hearing this before Richard Whitman? I asked. Because you're the risk, he said simply. Not the company, not Emily. You. There it was. Clear. Unemotional. If the company collapses, he continued, the trust absorbs the damage. That's why the side letter exists. And if the guarantor refuses to cooperate? I asked. And if the guarantor restructures independently? He leaned back. Then the board panics. I smiled slightly. That's what I thought. He studied me. You're not asking how to fix this. No, I said. I'm asking how exposed I am. Ethan didn't hesitate. Very. We sat in silence for a moment. People passed outside the cafe, unaware that a family business was quietly unraveling inside a spreadsheet. What happens if I step away entirely? I asked. Legally, he said, you can't. Not without triggering a review. And that depends, he said, on how much noise you're willing to tolerate. Thank you, Ethan, I said. That's all I needed. He looked up at me. Claire, he added, this isn't personal. But if things move fast, they won't be gentle. I don't need gentle, I replied. I need accurate. I left without looking back. By noon, my phone was vibrating non-stop. Emily, my mother, my father. I didn't answer any of them. Instead, I walked into my office and closed the door. The one place no one in my family had ever been invited. The walls were glass, but the silence inside was mine. I pulled up my calendar. In 3 weeks, Whitman Freight was scheduled to host its annual client summit, a big one this year. New contracts, press, a speech from Emily about the future of the company. Public optimism, private fragility. I forwarded the event invite to Daniel Moore. Subject: timing question. Then I called Marcus Reed. I need a favor, I said when he answered. I was hoping you'd say that, he replied. That afternoon, my mother showed up unannounced at my apartment. Margaret Whitman didn't knock. She never did when she was anxious. You're not returning calls, she said the moment I opened the door. No, I agreed. She walked in, taking in the clean lines, the absence of family photos. Why are you doing this? She asked. I closed the door behind her. Doing what? I said. Creating tension, she replied. Your father is furious. Emily is terrified. I leaned against the counter. Then they're finally paying attention. Her mouth tightened. This isn't how families behave. This is how systems correct imbalance, I said. She looked at me like I'd spoken another language. You've always been so capable, she said softly. Why can't you just let this go? I met her gaze. Because letting it go costs me everything. She shook her head. You're exaggerating. I walked to my desk and pulled out a single document. The side letter. I placed it on the table between us. She read it, slowly. Her face changed. They said it was a formality, she whispered. They said I'd never need to know, I replied. Her hands trembled slightly. Your father thought he was protecting the family. He was protecting the hierarchy, I said. At my expense. She sat down heavily. What do you want? She asked again. This time, it wasn't rhetorical. I want out, I said, cleanly. And I want the collateral removed. Her eyes widened. That would cripple the company. No, I said. It would force honesty. She looked away. Your sister isn't ready. Neither was I replied. They didn't care. Silence settled between us. Thick, uncomfortable. You're asking me to choose, she said. I'm asking you to acknowledge, I corrected. There's a difference. She stood. I need time, she said. You've had years, I replied. That evening, I finally answered Emily's call. She didn't bother with pleasantries. They're talking about bringing in outside advisors, she said. Dad thinks someone's stirring the bank. I lay back on my couch. They should, I said. It's overdue. Is this you? She asked. I didn't answer immediately. If it were, I said finally, what would that change? Her voice cracked. I trusted you, and I protected you, I replied, for a long time. So this is punishment, she demanded. No, I said. This is reality, arriving without my buffer. She was quiet for a long moment. What happens next? She asked. I looked at the skyline, the city glowing, indifferent, and relentless. That depends, I said, on whether you want to inherit a title or a truth. She hung up without responding. Later that night, as I reviewed documents and timelines, I thought about the people listening to this story right now. About how many of them were sitting in quiet rooms, holding invisible responsibilities no one had acknowledged. If that's you, if you've ever been the safety net no one thanked, take a moment, like the video, leave a comment, subscribe. Not for me, but for the reminder that silence is only power when you choose it. I closed my laptop just after midnight. The summit was in 21 days. By then, everything would be public. And the family that taught me never to make a scene was about to learn what happens when the quiet one stops absorbing the damage. Not with shouting, with timing. The first resignation landed on Emily's desk 2 days later. It was the operations controller, Mark Feldman. A man who had been with Whitman Freight Solutions for 11 years and had never missed a deadline. He didn't make a scene. He didn't threaten. He submitted a 2-paragraph notice citing strategic misalignment and personal risk exposure. Emily called me within minutes. Do you know about this? She asked, breathless. Yes, I said. You told him to leave. No, I replied. I stopped telling him to stay. There was a sharp inhale on the other end of the line. That's the same thing, she snapped. It really isn't, I said calmly. She hung up. By the end of the week, 2 more departures followed. Quiet exits, no drama, just people who understood balance sheets well enough to recognize when a structure was built on someone else's silence. My father blamed consultants. My mother blamed stress. Emily blamed timing. No one blamed the design. I stayed visible, but neutral. I showed up to my own meetings. I posted nothing. I answered only when addressed directly, and even then, with restraint. That restraint unnerved them more than anger ever would have. On Friday afternoon, Daniel Moore called. They're amending the board charter, he said. To include? I asked. Emergency powers, he replied. Your sister will be able to override department heads without full approval. That will spook the bank, I said. Yes, Daniel agreed. Unless they think you're backing it. I smiled faintly. They don't know where I stand anymore. That's the problem, he said. For them. I ended the call and stared at the calendar again. 17 days until the summit. That night, I attended a private dinner downtown. Not a family event, not a business pitch. A small invitation-only gathering, hosted by a retired judge I'd once helped place in the board of a nonprofit. 8 guests, no press, good wine. I didn't expect to see my aunt there. Helen Whitman, my father's older sister, had always been the family's shadow. No title, no spotlight. She'd sold her shares years ago and walked away with a modest check and her dignity intact. She raised an eyebrow when she saw me. "Well," she said, kissing my cheek, "it seems the quiet ones are out tonight." We sat together, by default. "You're causing a stir," she said lightly, cutting into her steak. "I'm minding my exposure," I replied. She chuckled. "Your father never understood you." "That's generous," I said. She leaned closer. "He's scared." I glanced at her. "Of what?" "Of losing control," she said. "And of being seen." I took a sip of wine. "He always thought you'd absorb the shocks," she continued. "You were convenient." I didn't argue. "Do you know why I left the business?" she asked. I shook my head. "Because I realized that in this family, power is inherited, but responsibility is assigned," she said. "You got assigned." I smiled. Genuine this time. "You're changing the math," she added. "Be careful. When men like your father feel cornered, they don't negotiate. They consolidate." The word stayed with me. The following Monday, my mother called early. Too early. "Claire," Margaret said, her voice strained. "We need to talk. All of us." I glanced at the time. 6:48 a.m. "About what?" I asked. "The summit," she said. "And your role." I waited. "Your father thinks it would be good optics," she continued, "if you appeared on stage with Emily. Just briefly. A show of unity." There it was. Public inclusion without private power. "And after the summit?" I asked. "We'll discuss long-term arrangements," she said quickly. "I see," I replied. "You don't sound reassured," she said. "I'm not," I replied, "but I'll think about it." After we hung up, I called Ethan Brooks again. "Hypothetically," I said, "if a guarantor requested an independent review of a loan structure before a public event, how quickly could that happen?" He didn't hesitate. "Fast," he said, and loudly. I thanked him and hung up. By Wednesday, Emily stopped calling. That was worse. Silence from her didn't mean calm. It meant strategy. Or desperation. I found out which one on Thursday afternoon, when a courier delivered a thick envelope to my office. Inside was a draft agreement. Title: Advisory Participation and Non-Interference Clause. I read it once. Then again. They wanted my face, my credibility, my implied support. In exchange, they offered me a consulting fee and a clause barring me from communicating with lenders independently. It was elegant. It was insulting. I forwarded it to Daniel with one line. "They think I'm decorative." He replied almost instantly. "Do you want me to respond?" "No," I typed back. "I'll handle it." That evening, I called Emily. She answered on the third ring. "I got the document," I said. Her voice was tight. "We thought it was fair." "You thought I'd accept it," I replied. "There's a difference." "You don't understand the pressure I'm under," she said. "I understand it intimately," I replied. "I just never had the option to outsource it." She exhaled. "What do you want, Claire?" I leaned back in my chair. "I want the guarantor released," I said. "I want transparency with the bank. And I want my name removed from anything I don't control." "That's impossible," she said. "No," I replied. "It's inconvenient." "You'd sink us," she said. "I'd stop floating you," I corrected. Her voice dropped. "Dad will never agree." "Then the summit will be interesting," I said. She went quiet. "You wouldn't," she whispered. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I haven't done anything yet," I said. "But I will." After the call, I stood by the window and watched the city darken. Somewhere across town, my father was probably pacing. My mother was probably smoothing edges. Emily was probably rewriting speeches. They were preparing a performance. I was preparing disclosure. The summit wasn't just a celebration anymore. It was a deadline. And in 11 days, the family that taught me never to air dirty laundry was about to learn the cost of laundering debt with silence. I turned off the lights in my office and left without looking back. The next move wouldn't be mine alone, but it would be irreversible. The email from the bank arrived on a Monday morning at 6:03 a.m. Not to my father, not to Emily, to me. Subject: Notice of Independent Risk Review. No greeting, no explanation. Just a PDF attached and a line that read, "As discussed." I didn't open it right away. I made coffee. I stood by the window and watched the city wake up, the way I always did when something irreversible had already been set in motion. Then I opened the file. The review would begin in 48 hours. Full access requested. Financials, guarantees, side letters, internal communications. The kind of audit that didn't accuse, but didn't forgive either. My phone rang less than 3 minutes later. My father. I let it ring. Twice. 3 times. Then my mother. Then Emily. I answered none of them. By 9, my assistant buzzed my office. "Claire," she said carefully, "your family is downstairs." Of course they were. I told her to send them up. Richard Whitman entered first. No coat, no smile. He looked smaller than he had in Newark, as if the city had stripped something away from him. Margaret followed, lips pressed tight, eyes darting. Emily came last, pale, clutching a folder to her chest like armor. No one sat until I did. "You called the bank," my father said. No preamble. "I spoke to them," I replied. "You went behind our backs," Emily said, her voice shaking. "I stepped out from under yours," I corrected. Margaret leaned forward. "Claire, this is spiraling. The timing couldn't be worse." "The timing is precise," I said. "The summit is in 8 days." Richard slammed his hand on the table. "Do you have any idea what this will do?" "Yes," I said calmly. "That's why I waited." Emily finally opened the folder she'd been holding. She slid it toward me. "It's revised," she said. "The agreement. We took out the non-interference clause." I glanced at it. Barely. "That wasn't the problem," I said. "Then what do you want?" she demanded. "Tell us, clearly, once." I met her eyes. "I want the guarantor released," I said, immediately. "I want the bank informed that I am no longer collateral for a company I don't control. And I want my name removed from the summit materials." Richard laughed, sharp and humorless. "You're burning bridges." "No," I said. "I'm closing exits." "You think you're untouchable," he snapped. "You think because you've got your own money and your own little world that you can humiliate us." I didn't raise my voice. "You humiliated yourselves," I said. I just stopped absorbing it. Margaret's eyes filled. "This is your family, and this is my life," I replied. "Those 2 things stopped aligning a long time ago." Emily stood abruptly. "If the bank pulls back, contracts freeze. We lose clients. People lose jobs." I nodded. "That's why I suggested transparency months ago." "You never said." "I said everything," I interrupted. "You just didn't hear it." Silence fell heavy. Richard finally spoke, quieter now. "If you do this, you're out." I looked at him. Really looked. At the man who taught me to read balance sheets before bedtime stories. At the man who taught me that loyalty mattered more than comfort. "I've been out," I said. "You just forgot to tell me." Margaret reached for my hand. I didn't pull away this time. "What if we fix it?" she said softly. "After the summit." Quietly, I shook my head. "Quiet is how we got here." Emily's voice broke. "You're doing this to prove a point." "No," I said. "I'm doing this to survive." Richard straightened. "Then you leave us no choice." "I know," I replied. They left without another word. An hour later, my phone buzzed with a notification from the company's internal system. A mass email had gone out. Subject: Leadership Update. Ahead of Annual Summit. Emily's name. Her title. A paragraph about resilience and forward momentum. My name was still there. As special advisor. I forwarded the email to Daniel. "They're bluffing." He replied within seconds. "So are you," I smiled. "Not anymore." That afternoon, I sent one email. To the Summit Planning Committee, please remove my name and likeness from all materials, effective immediately. I will not be participating. No explanation. No apology. The response came an hour later. Polite. Panicked. By evening, the press had caught wind of the audit. Nothing explicit, just whispers. Analysts asking questions. Clients postponing confirmations. That night, Emily called again. Her voice was raw. "They're asking me questions I can't answer," she said. "The bank, the board, I don't know what to say." I closed my eyes. "Say the truth," I said. "Say you inherited something fragile." "And you?" she asked. "I'm stepping aside," I replied. "Publicly." She inhaled sharply. "You're leaving me." "No," I said. "I'm leaving the illusion." She was quiet for a long time. "I don't think I can do this," she whispered. I thought of the dinner, the applause, the confidence. "You already are," I said. "The question is whether you'll do it honestly." After the call, I opened my calendar and blocked out the summit day. Not to attend, to watch. Because the thing about stepping out of the room is that you finally see who collapses when you're no longer holding the ceiling up. And in 7 days, the entire industry would be watching too. They just didn't know my silence was about to get very loud. By Wednesday morning, the word audit stopped being a rumor and became a headline. Nothing dramatic, no accusations, just enough uncertainty to make people cautious. Clients delayed signatures. Vendors asked for reassurances in writing. The bank stopped returning calls as quickly. Emily stopped sleeping. I knew because she texted me at 3:14 a.m. I don't know what I'm doing. I stared at the message for a long time before replying. Neither did I, the first time they handed me responsibility without authority. She didn't respond. That day, I took a meeting I'd been postponing for months. Lunch with Naomi Carter, a private equity partner who'd tried to recruit me twice and never pushed when I declined. We met at a quiet place in Tribeca, the kind of restaurant that didn't mind long silences. "You look free," Naomi said after we ordered. I smiled. "I feel unassigned." She raised an eyebrow. "That can be dangerous. It can also be profitable," I replied. She leaned back. "Word is, your family's company is wobbling." "Word travels fast," I said. "And so do people," she replied. "If you ever wanted to detach completely, there are options." "I know," I said. "I'm exploring them." She nodded. "Good, because systems like that don't forgive clarity." After lunch, Daniel called. "They've requested a temporary injunction," he said. "To stop the audit?" I asked. "To stop you," he replied. "They're claiming interference." I laughed once. "On what grounds?" "Fiduciary obligation," he said. "As a named beneficiary." "That you're protecting yourself from undisclosed risk," he said. "Which you are." "Then let them file," I said. She didn't bring her coat inside. She sat stiffly on the edge of my couch. "Your father isn't well," she said. I nodded. "I'm sorry. He says you've turned against us." I met her eyes. I turned toward myself. She shook her head. "This isn't how it was supposed to go." "No," I agreed. "It's how it always was." She took a breath. "If you walk away now, there may be no going back." "I'm not walking away," I said. "I'm stepping out of the line of fire." Her voice cracked. "Emily will fail." I paused. "Then the company was built on the wrong assumptions," I said quietly. She stood abruptly. "You sound heartless." "I sound honest," I replied. She left without another word. The next morning, Emily's name was removed from 2 panels she was scheduled to speak on at the summit. Sponsors cited scheduling conflicts. 1 cited optics. I didn't celebrate. I prepared. I reviewed my notes, timelines, emails, every moment where I'd raised a concern and been dismissed with a smile. By Friday, the injunction hearing was set for the following week. The same week as the summit. Of course it was. Daniel met me at my office late that afternoon. "They're desperate," he said. "They want to freeze you." "They can't," I replied. "No," he agreed. "But they can make noise." I looked out at the city, the traffic threading its way through streets that never asked permission. "Let them," I said. That night, I drafted a letter. Not to the bank, not to the board, to myself. I wrote down every compromise I'd made to stay included. Every time I'd swallowed something sharp to keep the peace. Every meeting I'd saved that no one knew was on fire. Then I closed the document and deleted it. I didn't need the record. I needed the release. On Sunday, 2 days before the summit, Emily showed up at my door. She looked smaller than I remembered. No makeup, no armor. "I'm scared," she said. I stepped aside and let her in. We sat in silence for a moment. "They don't trust me," she said. "The board, the bank, Dad." "They never taught you how to be trusted," I replied. She looked up. "Why are you doing this?" I considered the question. "Because I was trained to fix things quietly," I said. "And that training almost cost me my future." She nodded slowly. "I don't want to be like them," she whispered. I believed her. That was the hardest part. "Then stop trying to inherit approval," I said. "Start earning clarity." She swallowed. "Will you be there?" "At the summit?" I asked. She nodded. "I'll be listening," I said. She left without hugging me. By Monday morning, the injunction was denied. Temporary, procedural, but public. The summit would go on. So would the audit. And somewhere between a stage and a spreadsheet, the story my family had told itself for decades was about to collapse under the weight of its own omissions. I went to bed that night knowing one thing: tomorrow, I wouldn't speak, and everyone would finally hear me. The summit began at 9 sharp, exactly the way my father liked it. On time, controlled, scripted. I watched from the back of the room, not the audience seating, the service corridor behind the ballroom, where catering staff moved quietly and no one expected to see me. I had a badge, but it didn't have my name on it, just guest. It was the first time in years I'd entered a Whitman Freight event without being responsible for something breaking. The room was full: clients, lenders, local press, industry analysts who pretended they were there for insights when they were really there for tells. The kind of crowd that could smell weakness before it appeared on a slide. Emily was scheduled to open. She stood at the podium in a tailored navy suit that tried very hard to look authoritative. Her hands shook once when she adjusted the microphone. She caught herself quickly. "Good morning," she said. "Thank you for being here." Her voice was steady. I gave her that. She spoke about growth, about resilience, about navigating uncertainty with confidence. She avoided numbers. She avoided projections. She talked in language that bought time. From the corner of the room, I saw Ethan Brooks arrive. He didn't sit. He stood against the back wall, arms crossed, eyes scanning. The audit was no longer theoretical. Halfway through Emily's speech, my father joined her on stage. That wasn't on the agenda. A ripple moved through the room. Richard Whitman smiled the way men do when they think proximity still equals authority. "Thank you, Emily," he said, taking the microphone. "Before we continue, I want to acknowledge someone important." My name came up on the screen behind him. Claire Whitman, advisor, family. A photograph I hadn't approved. Taken years ago. I felt something in my chest go very still. "She's been instrumental to our success," my father said. "And while she couldn't join us on stage today, her guidance remains part of our foundation." That was the play. Public credit. Private containment. I stepped forward before I had time to reconsider. Not onto the stage. Into the aisle. People turned. Whispers followed. I didn't look at my father. I looked at the moderator, a woman named Karen Liu, who had once interviewed me for a panel I'd ended up carrying. "Karen," I said quietly, but the microphone picked it up. "May I clarify something?" The room froze. Karen hesitated for half a second, then nodded. "Of course," she said. "Claire, would you like to join us?" "No," I replied. "I'd like to be accurate." I turned to the audience. "I am not an advisor to Whitman Freight Solutions," I said evenly. "I am not involved in operations, strategy, or decision-making. I am a private individual whose name was used without consent." My father's face tightened. "This isn't appropriate," he said into the mic. "I agree," I replied. "Which is why I tried to resolve it privately." Emily stared at me. Not angry, stricken. "I am also not a guarantor by choice," I continued. "Nor was I informed when my financial future was placed at risk without authority or disclosure." Ethan shifted his weight. The board members exchanged glances. "This company is undergoing an independent audit," I said. "That process is ongoing. Any representation of stability should be viewed in that context." Silence. Not shock. Calculation. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't accuse. I didn't explain further. I simply said, "Thank you," and stepped back. Karen cleared her throat. "Let's take a short break." People stood. Conversations erupted. Analysts typed furiously. Clients avoided eye contact. Emily didn't follow me. My father did. He caught up to me near the exit, his voice low and furious. "You blindsided us," he hissed. "You ambushed yourself," I replied. "You've destroyed us," he said. "No," I said calmly. I stopped pretending. He stared at me like he was seeing a stranger. "Was it worth it?" he asked. I thought of the years, the late nights, the quiet fixes. "Yes," I said. Outside, the air was cold and clean. I stood there for a moment, letting it settle. My phone buzzed. "Daniel, injunction hearing dismissed. Permanently." I closed my eyes. Then, another message. "Ethan Brooks, bank will require restructuring. They're requesting a meeting with ownership. Without you." I smiled faintly. Emily texted an hour later. "I didn't know. I should have listened." I typed back. "Now you are." If you're still with me, if this moment made your stomach drop or your pulse spike because you've been there, take a second. Like the story. Comment if you've ever been erased from your own work. Subscribe if you want to see how silence turns into leverage. I didn't go back inside. By evening, the headlines were careful but clear. Family rift surfaces at Whitman Freight Summit. Questions raised over governance and guarantees. I wasn't mentioned by name in all of them. That was fine. The consequences had started moving. And for the first time, they weren't moving through me. They were moving around me. Tomorrow, the fallout would begin. The morning after the summit, my phone was quiet. That was how I knew the damage had landed. No frantic calls, no emotional texts, just the absence of noise that follows public exposure, when everyone involved is busy explaining themselves to someone else. I woke up early anyway. Old habits. I went for a run along the Hudson, the river dark and steady beside me. Movement helps me think. By the time I finished, I already knew what the next few weeks would look like. Containment, repositioning, blame. By 10, Daniel Moore confirmed it. They're in emergency talks with the bank, he said. Full restructuring, new covenants, outside oversight. And my exposure, I asked? Reduced, he replied. Not eliminated yet. But the leverage shifted yesterday. Good. They're also considering a press statement, he added. Something about miscommunication. I laughed quietly. Of course they are. They might try to bring you back in, Daniel said. On better terms. I'm not for rent, I replied. That afternoon, I received an email from the board of Whitman Freight Solutions. Subject: request for clarification. They wanted a meeting. Confidential. Off-site. I didn't respond. Instead, I called Naomi Carter. I'm done waiting, I said. She smiled on the other end. Then it's time. We met the next day in her office, 30 floors up, with a view that made most negotiations feel smaller than they were. She didn't waste time. I can place you, she said. Or I can back you. I don't want a seat, I replied. I want control. She nodded once. Then we built something. By Thursday, my father finally called again. I answered. This didn't have to be public, he said, his voice tired now. It didn't have to be hidden, I replied. You've cost us contracts, he said. No, I said. I exposed assumptions. There was a long pause. What do you want? He asked, for the third time in as many weeks. I want my guarantor status terminated, I said. In writing. I want a clean separation. And I want acknowledgement that I was excluded deliberately. He exhaled. You want an apology. I want accuracy, I said. That night, Emily emailed me. Not a text, an email. Subject: I'm sorry. It was short, clumsy, real. I should have fought harder. I didn't see it until it was mine. I'm not asking you to come back. I just want you to know I see you now. I sat with it for a long time before replying. I know. On Friday, Daniel forwarded me a draft agreement. They were releasing the guarantor. It came with conditions. Confidentiality. Non-disparagement. Distance. I signed. Not because they deserved my silence. Because I deserved my exit. That evening, I packed the last box of documents tied to my family's company. I didn't shred them. I archived them. Memory matters, even when you're moving on. I took a call from Marcus Reed as I taped the box shut. You free for dinner? He asked. Free enough, I replied. We ate somewhere loud and unpretentious. He told me about a new platform they were launching. I listened, asked questions, felt my mind stretch in a way it hadn't in months. You look lighter, he said. I am, I replied. Later, walking home, my phone buzzed again. Emily, they're asking me to step down. I stopped on the sidewalk. I didn't reply right away. Then I typed. That's not your failure to carry. It was the last thing I sent that night. The following Monday, Whitman Freight Solutions announced an interim leadership team and a strategic review. My name was nowhere in the statement. That was intentional. I sat in my office, a clean calendar in front of me, and made a list. Not of what I'd lost, of what I was about to build. This is the part most people don't see. The quiet aftermath. The space where revenge fades and responsibility begins. If you're still here, if you've stayed through the fallout instead of the spectacle, you know this part matters more. Like the story. Comment if you've ever walked away without burning the building down. Subscribe if you want to see what happens after the doors close. Because the next chapter isn't about them. It's about what I do when no one is watching. And that, finally, is the part I've been waiting to tell. Silence has a texture. It's heavier than noise, denser than anger. It presses in when the adrenaline is gone, and the story stops being about what was done to you and starts being about what you'll do next. The week after I signed the release, I didn't tell anyone where I was going. I rented a small workspace downtown. Not impressive. Not temporary either. No name on the door. Just a key card and a view of a brick wall. It felt right. Anonymous. Earned. Naomi Carter joined me there 2 days later with a legal pad and coffee that tasted like intent. "We can move fast," she said, sitting across from me. "Or we can move clean." "Clean," I said. "Always clean," she nodded. "Then we start with the assets you know better than anyone. Logistics. Infrastructure. The companies your family ignored because they weren't flashy." I smiled faintly. They never looked down, only forward. "And missed everything under their feet," Naomi said. "We sketched for hours. Not a company yet, a framework. A way of working that didn't rely on borrowed credibility or inherited patience. I didn't want to fix broken systems anymore. I wanted to replace them." That night, I went through old notebooks. Not sentimental ones, operational ones. Margins, bottlenecks, vendor behaviors no one else noticed because they weren't in the room when contracts fell apart quietly. Patterns emerged. They always do. Midweek, Daniel Moore called with an update I'd been expecting. "The bank finalized the restructuring," he said. "Your father stepped down as chair." I closed my eyes for a moment. "And Emily?" I asked. "Interim COO," he replied. "For now." I pictured her standing alone in a conference room she'd never been allowed to control, holding responsibility without permission. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt distance. "Any retaliation?" I asked. "Not toward you," Daniel said. "They can't afford it." Good. Later that day, my mother called. Not to apologize. To ask, "Are you happy?" Linda Whitman said, her voice careful, as if happiness were a fragile object she wasn't sure she was allowed to touch. "I'm stable," I replied. "That's better." She was quiet. "You always wanted more," she said. "No," I corrected gently. "I wanted fair." She didn't argue. That night, I received a message from an unfamiliar number. "This is Ethan Brooks. I'd like to talk. Off the record." I agreed to meet him the following morning. We sat across from each other in a cafe neither of us had chosen. He didn't pretend this was casual. "They underestimated you," he said plainly. "They always did," I replied. He studied me. "You're not done with this industry." "No," I said. "I'm just done being invisible in it." He slid a card across the table. "If you need regulatory air cover, call me. You're building something." "I am," I said. "And you won't ask for permission," he added. I smiled. No. By Friday, Naomi had secured quiet commitments. Not investments yet. Interest. The kind that listens instead of interrupts. I didn't announce anything. I didn't update LinkedIn. I didn't reclaim my name publicly. I let the absence speak. That afternoon, Emily emailed again. They offered me a settlement. Personal, not corporate. I declined. She replied an hour later. "I understand. I just wanted to tell you, I'm proud of you." I stared at the words, then closed the laptop. Pride wasn't currency. And it didn't change what had already happened. But it did mark an end. Saturday morning, I visited my grandmother's old house. The one that had been sold quietly years ago. The proceeds redirected without discussion. I stood on the sidewalk and remembered being a child there, learning how to balance checkbooks at the kitchen table, because she said numbers didn't lie when people did. I carried that with me. Sunday night, Naomi sent me a draft. Name, structure, initial scope. I read it slowly. This wasn't revenge. This was replacement. On Monday, I signed the incorporation papers. I didn't tell my family. I didn't tell the press, I told myself. You don't need witnesses to begin. As I closed my notebook that evening, my phone buzzed with a final update from Daniel. "They're still talking about you," he said. "Let them," I replied. I looked around the room. Bare walls, clear desk, No inherited expectations. For the first time, my future wasn't a reaction. It was a choice. And in the quiet, with no one watching and nothing left to prove, I realized something that took years to learn. It trains you. And the people who taught you how to survive without recognition never see what you become once you stop waiting for it. Tomorrow, I would open the doors. One last chapter remained. I opened the doors on a Tuesday. Not a launch party, not a press release, just a key turning in a lock that belonged to me. The office wasn't impressive. 3 rooms, clean lines, no inherited portraits on the wall, no legacy furniture polished by other people's pride. Just space that hadn't learned how to shrink me yet. I arrived before sunrise. Old habit. I made coffee, set my bag down, and stood for a moment in the quiet. The kind of quiet that isn't absence, but readiness. By 9, Naomi Carter arrived with a folder, and the kind of smile that only comes after something irreversible. "It's done," she said. "All filings cleared. The first client wired the retainer this morning." I nodded. No celebration, just acknowledgement. "Who?" I asked. "A regional freight network out of Ohio," she said. "Family-owned, 4th generation. They were nearly crushed by a consolidation play last year. They want protection, not exposure." I smiled faintly. They came to the right place. By noon, the phones were ringing. Quiet inquiries. Careful voices. People who had watched what happened to my family's company and were suddenly curious why I wasn't mentioned as collateral damage. They didn't ask about revenge. They asked about process. By mid-afternoon, Daniel Moore stopped by unannounced. He looked around, taking it in. "No logo," he observed. "Not yet," I said. "Smart," he replied. "Let the work speak first." He handed me a thin envelope. "From the bank," he said. "Final confirmation. You're fully released. No lingering obligations." I took it. Felt the weight of paper instead of pressure. "Congratulations," he added. "You're clean." After he left, I sat alone again. I thought about how many times I'd imagined this moment as something louder. A public reckoning. Applause. Vindication. This was better. At 4:30, my mother called. Not to argue. Not to plead. "I heard you started something," Linda Whitman said. "Yes," I replied. I considered telling her the name, the structure, the scope. Instead, I said, "Mine." She was quiet for a long time. "I wish we'd listened sooner," she said. "I know," I replied. And for the first time, I meant it, without resentment. That evening, I stayed late. I reviewed contracts, made notes, marked risks, built guardrails before momentum could seduce me into shortcuts. Around 8, my phone buzzed. "Emily, they made it official today. Dad's out. The board is fractured. I'm not sure what happens next." I typed back. "What happens next is their responsibility now." She didn't reply. I locked up just after 9. The city felt different when I stepped outside. Not because it had changed, but because I had. At home, I poured a glass of wine and sat by the window. I thought about everything that had happened. The exclusion, the manipulation, the quiet ways people rewrite your role until you disappear inside their version of events. I thought about how close I came to believing them. And then I thought about something my grandmother used to say when I was a child, and I complained that no one noticed my work. "Good," she'd say. "That means you're learning to move without permission." I finally understood. The next morning, an industry newsletter ran a small piece. Former Whitman heir launches independent advisory firm focused on governance and risk. No drama, no speculation. Just facts. My father didn't call. Neither did my sister. That was fine. By the end of the week, we had 3 clients. By the end of the month, 7. All referred. All quiet. All deliberate. I wasn't rebuilding a reputation. I was building a boundary. One afternoon, Naomi looked at me across the table and said, "You know they're watching." "I know," I replied, "and you don't care." I smiled. I care very precisely. On the anniversary of the summit, I received a handwritten note. No return address. "You were right about everything. I'm learning late, but I'm learning." I folded it and placed it in a drawer I rarely open. Some things don't need answers. If you've stayed with me through this story, through the quiet choices and the controlled exits. You already know this wasn't about destroying anyone. It was about refusing to be destroyed quietly. If you've ever been excluded from a will, sidelined at a wedding, erased at Christmas dinner, or written out of a family business you helped build, understand this. Justice doesn't always look like revenge. Sometimes it looks like ownership. Sometimes it looks like walking away with your name intact and your future unleveraged. If this story resonated, take a moment, like it. Comment if you've ever chosen yourself when it cost you belonging. Subscribe if you want more stories where karma isn't loud, just inevitable. As for me, I don't sit at inherited tables anymore. I build my own. And in the long run, that's the only kind of power that lasts.